Today I'm going to be giving a micro lesson about the history of laws and the ocean. Now, first, what does this topic make you think of? Jog your memory if you have any previous knowledge about oceanic laws and their history. If not, no worries, that's what this lesson is for, but it's always good to start jogging your memory beforehand. Now, we're going to start at the beginning. Ownership of the ocean was not always a concern. Until the 1600s, there were not really any restrictions on it, and so people were free to travel and fish as they pleased. Now, the British established their territorial sea in 1672. They claimed the territorial sea was their ownership over the strip of ocean 5.6 kilometers off of their coastline. Now, this roughly corresponded to the range of their shore based cannons. And this territorial sea concept became widely accepted, and then the League of Nations formally recognized this standard of the territorial sea in 1930. Now, what about the area outside of the territorial sea? They began to call that the high seas. And the high seas fell under no specific ownership, and its resources were open to any nation. And this standard with the high seas and the territorial seas was what we abided by through World War II. And then in 1945, President Harry Truman issued the Truman Proclamation. Now, the Truman Proclamation stated that the U.S. had control over its continental shelf rather than just its territorial sea. And the continental shelf wasn't explicitly defined in the proclamation, but based off a statement that followed it, we know that the continental shelf was meant to include all land connected to the continent covered by 183 meters or less of water. And now, this proclamation and this expansion of the continental shelf was an attempt to expand the U.S. territorial control of ocean resources, such as minerals and oil. And the Truman Proclamation prompted many other nations to make their own rulings and claims on oceanic resources. So there was no longer any uniformity, and nations continued to kind of one up each other in these. For instance, nations along South America's western coast with narrower continental shelves stated ownership over resources 370 kilometers from the coastline. Now, there needed to be a way to resolve all of these competing claims. So the United Nations started having these conventions called the Law of the Seas Conventions. And ultimately, the 1982 one is kind of the one that solidified what we needed to get done and where we are today. So this one streamlined claims to ocean territory, set up a comprehensive framework, and outlined claims to ocean resources. This convention gave us the Law of the Sea Treaty, and this passed with a 130-4 vote. The United States was one of the nations that voted no. However, because of how widely accepted this treaty is and how widely ratified it is, the U.S. still recognizes the rules within the Law of the Sea Treaty as being customary. So they streamlined what the territorial sea would contain, and they gave us some other standards such as the exclusive economic zone and more things that you can learn about in more detail after this micro lesson. But thank you for listening to my micro lesson, and I hope you learned something.